This is Functional and Fabulous, the omni-channel podcast, where we unbox tales of online retail and digital transformation.
In this episode...
Luxury is difficult.
No, it's easy. Say after me. Luxury.
Luxury.
No. Luxury.
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 Oh, somebody help me.
Luxury.
Not you.
Luxury.
Thank you, Marshall.
I'm going to stop pronouncing luxury like that now. But in the case of luxury, I think...
You're still pronouncing it that way.
This is going to take forever.
In the tier above premium...
Good enough. What else are we covering in this episode?
I've managed to survive Storm Ciarán, so you know.
Oh, I think you'll find it's Storm Ciarán.
This episode of Functional and Fabulous is brought to you with pride by Studio 49, retail e-commerce experts, omni-channel growth consultants, and cut-through performance marketing specialists. Studio 49, where your digital retail success is built.
Hello, and you're very welcome to another episode of Functional and Fabulous, where this week we're joined by Marshall David Johnson. Marshall is currently Digital Trading Manager at Fenwick in the UK. He is a senior manager and has over a decade of experience with both the iconic boutique Browns, where he worked for 12 years, and the luxury fashion marketplace Farfetch. Marshall is used to the unique characteristics of both the bricks and mortar and the requirements of serious digital innovation, working with global stakeholders and helping them to scale e-commerce business. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot in this.
There's quite a lot in that.
Is there? Do I need to keep on going? Marshall.
I think we just need to say hello.
Marshall,
Hi.
It's great to have you here. How are you keeping?
Yeah, really well. I've managed to survive Storm Ciarán, so you know.
Oh, I think you'll find it's Storm Ciarán.
Of course, yes.
I was wondering when I was looking at like Storm Ciarán, like battering the UK, did everybody give it the proper,
No,
attention to the second
probably
syllable?
Storm Ciarán is what that would totally have been.
Yeah.
Because in my house it was Storm Ciarán as well.
The weather clobbered us good. We deserve it.
So, well, glad to hear you're surviving. We've actually been underwater quite a bit over here as well, so we feel the pain.
Yeah.
We had, what was her name? Storm Betty?
Babette.
That's
Babette.
it. Yeah.
Anyway, enough storms.
Okay.
This is the episode I've been waiting. It's the luxury episode. And we are delighted to be joined by you today and to chat through some of the challenges and some of the opportunities that sit around retailing luxury.
So I guess, Marshall, I wonder if you could help us understand at the outset how a luxury store is different to a multi-brand store. I mean, you've obviously got a lot of experience with the luxury store side of things. How you see that as different to the kind of the multi-store or the multi-brand store set up online?
Yeah, I think a big difference with the sort of luxury side of things is the amount of power that the brands have, and even to the point where allowing you to sell them. So something that shocked me when I first started working at Browns was that you can't just go to Gucci and say, oh, I want to sell the collection. Or also that you can't just go and say, I want this dress and those shoes in that bag, and I don't want the rest. Basically, they decide who they sell to based off of history with working with the brand or the people working there that, they know. So if you are a new store and you have kind of influential people from the industry there, that can help your case. But usually it's done to, people who have worked with them for decades or centuries in some cases. And you also tend to you're restricted in what you can buy in terms of quantities. So you might have, really hype products or like the best selling bag, but you're only allowed to buy 5. And alongside that bag, you have to take, a continuity pack, which unfortunately doesn't sell as well, the kind of, more basic clothing sort of items. So it's a very different business than what I sort of imagined it before I started working there. And also compared to where I am now, which is premium. I mean, we have kind of bridge brands, but it is a lot more, at our discretion, what we price items at, what ranges we can get. Well, we can do lots of swaps. You can get lots of ATS, which is like stock in the season. Whereas with luxury, if you have a bestseller, even with one they might have like you could get more if you wanted. Usually there's no stock because they only produced a certain line or a certain amount, and it's gone to all stockists or their own stores. And if it's sold out, it's sold out. So that kind of active in-season trading with bestsellers is harder in luxury because you don't tend to ever get replens.
Yeah, but luxury needs to have that air of exclusivity and scarcity, right?
Yeah,
that's what makes it luxurious. It's not for everybody.
No, exactly, and that's what they really trade on. I mean, Celine was so successful for nearly a decade because it was so scarce. Like, they didn't sell online. We were allowed to sort of mention on our A to Z page that we had them in the store, but you couldn't, have a whiff of sales online, and that drove people crazy. And they also, that's total exclusivity scarcity case right there.
So you've been at Brown, or you spent a lot of time at Brown's Fashion, and the fashion industry over the last decade has really undergone some huge changes, particularly with luxury brands adopting streetwear and adopting those kind of more accessible styles. And a brand or a retailer like Brown's that has been around so long and had such a distinctive customer proposition in that more exclusive space. How did that kind of change over the time that you were there, and what did that mean for you as somebody leading e-commerce?
Yeah, that was a really interesting one because when I started it, we had very much more classic, older customer who, bought Alaya dresses or dresses for events and high heels, Louboutins and fine jewelry. But then we started to sell in our young designer store, Brown's Focus, these Brian Lichtenberg hoodies from LA, and they sold out immediately. And then because it's more of a contemporary price point product, you get ATS. So we got new stock in and sold out again. So then we ended up building out a bigger streetwear range. And at that point, they did sit into different site areas, the kind of classic Brown's high fashion and then the streetwear. And then around the time that Brown's was acquired by Farfetch and Holly Rogers came in as our new CEO from Net-a-Porter, it was that time right when fashion was changing, with this sort of high-low mix of people wearing trainers with their Valentino dresses. And her sort of vision that we implemented was, let's mix it all together, with the exception of some brands that didn't want to be mixed that way, but like Alaya. But for instance, with brands like Balenciaga, that was their aesthetic, was streetwear. So it kind of worked really well that we could just blend it. And we ended up and that was sort of our USP in the market, that we were sort of the first people to do that in the multi-brand luxury fashion e-commerce space. And we attracted a lot of younger customers for that sort of irreverence. And it worked really well because it also solved a problem of how are we gonna, before we had great automated merchandising where you could blend based off of brand adjacencies, you had to do it all manually. And with the way deliveries come in as well, you had to sort of curate your edits quite tricky. It's difficult to curate and edit if you only had some brands from classic, some brands from street. This way you could bring them together for outfits and for listings pages. So it worked really well, actually. But it was a big change from when I started, when, luxury was much more buttoned up, I guess.
When you first started, fashion's undergoing this seismic change over, and particularly luxury fashion is undergoing this seismic change over the last 10 years. But also technology is moving underneath our feet at the same time. And you touched on merchandising there. So can you talk us through a bit about how merchandising tools have evolved over that time and the kind of things that you were using?
Yeah, so when I first started at Brown's, we had a bespoke platform that had the merchandising was done off a numbered grid system. So if you would assign an index number to every product, the higher number would always go to the top of the page. And you also, of course, only would update every 15 minutes. So I literally would make a grid on a piece of paper beside my computer with my numbers and a note of what product that was, like green Gucci jacket, black Acne trousers, and then do my merchandising that way. I actually did quite a clever way of then, when they got kicked out of New In and went into listings, I assigned every color a prefix number. So black was kind of 10. Then I think I did blue as 9. And so then when you go to hit listings pages, every listings page for like coats or would just go from black to blue to green to yellow.
So color story, literally painting by numbers.
Yeah, literally. And then if I ran out of I think I had like 7 digits, then I had to start all over from scratch. I think I made an intern do the renumbering project at one point.
I feel for that intern.
Yeah. Oh, that was some real abusive interns back then, when rather than use like a VLOOKUP and say, oh, actually, can you just go through this sheet and just copy this into that? Yeah, it'd be great. No, but then kind of we got our own sort of the drag and drop kind of merchandising, which is quite standard now for manual merchandising. But even it was only, I think, until about 2017 that we started actually doing algorithms. I think manual merchandising still has a big part to play in luxury, because you are selling this sort of aspirational vision. So you always manually merchandise the top of pages, but then you also have trade actions you want to surface and pin to the top. But it was then after that, bringing in a blend that you could choose, make a cocktail out of, like how I want to weight bestsellers versus time on site versus recently viewed, customer may also view. And then that also leads into the recommendations you see on like product pages, which are now, completely controlled by algorithms normally. But I mean, we didn't even have those when I first started. It was just, we did Shop the Look, which is an interesting one because that's always a big fashion focal point, Shop the Look. And since we were so keen on our styling at Browns, we always had as a big priority, and it was very visible on the product page. But then the kind of tech wisdom was that, customers also bought or viewed is more powerful in terms of sales. And that's what should be you doing. And also you should be doing that because it's more scalable. Like manually creating these outfits in the system is a bad business practice. So we actually ran an A/B test of replacing that with a Shop the Look with a recommended instead. And it actually didn't perform as well. Our customers particularly really wanted to see that outfit and discover new products that we had sort of curated for them. Whereas it still was valuable that we had recommended running on the algorithm below the kind of outfit section, because there are customers who will, use that algorithm as well. But it was an interesting learning that the kind of tech wisdom wasn't necessarily correct. And it was worth doing the manual work to put the outfit in there.
Didn't necessarily meet the styling and the retail wisdom in. Yeah. And I suppose would that start in production? So the buyer has been presented with their limited assortment from the luxury brand, and that goes into a production process to be styled and photographed, and would that Shop the Look then need to carry right the way through from the product imagery into the way that the site was merchandised? Was that part of your...
so we actually assigned it with the styling assistants in the studio, but they would do it into the PIM basically as they were shooting the look. And then that way it carried through the whole way. So it was time consuming on that side of things. Once it was in, then it was in.
And did that change over time? So once Farfetch made that acquisition, was more technology brought in to facilitate that, or was it still a pretty manual job?
It stayed manual the whole time. I mean, there was lots of efficiencies that came in when Farfetch, because we also added size and fit assistants in the studio, and we ended up combining the roles. So, they would enter in the outfit while also measuring the product, checking the fit with the model, seeing if it was true to size. But the nature of that is kind of that it always was fairly manual. I mean, they added more scanning technology, I think. They used a barcode scanner, whereas I think in the past we would quite often do it semi-manually, like find the product on the website, in turn copy and paste the link, that type of thing.
And that's I think that doesn't sound very scalable. And I think for anyone listening, can you give us a bit of context about like size? So are we talking a couple of hundred? Are we talking a couple of thousand SKUs? Like what kind of size business are we talking about here on like a seasonal basis?
So Browns, when we were bought by Farfetch, was about 12,000 SKUs, so like unique styles a year. So about 6 a season. And then we moved it was a long time, over 5 years, we grew to 60,000 SKUs per year. And then the studio team also at the peak was about 100 in production across logistics, styling, assistants, so fit assistants, shopper look assistants, style assistants, photography, retouch, art direction. Yeah. So it was a massive team. But then actually with that many products, you're shooting pretty much flat out all day, every day.
100 sounds like a lot, but if it's over 60,000 styles in a year, that's 30,000 in a season. That's a lot of productivity out of each one of those 100 people, right?
I mean, we did shoot at peak. We would shoot weekends and do shifts as well. So you had like one that started at 6 a.m., finished at 2, and then someone came 2 to 10, basically, just to get the maximum.
That's pretty flat out. And the amount of data that you were capturing at the same time, when you're actually measuring the garments, checking the fit size, recording all of that information, there was actually a pretty substantial production process that you had there.
Yeah, it was big. I mean, I think also with it was quite big because with luxury, we're under lots of demands from the brands that the finished product looks a certain way. So particularly with styling, even if we were going to mix the high-low, it obviously had to look really good, because if you mix high-low and it looks bad, then you're really in trouble with the brand. So so that was our one kind of problem with that strategy, was that you had to really pull it off.
Yeah.
Whereas if you do head to toe, it's easier to make it look good because that's how the brand designed it. And, you can kind of just easily put it together, shoot it and move on. So that's why it was such a big team and a big support team of kind of managers at like styling and art direction level to kind of keep the team on point for that type of thing. But yeah, with the size and fit, actually, we did another pilot, which it's a shame it didn't. I mean, a lot of like Mr. Porter, the Nat group, basically, they were doing it for a while, which we did an A/B test of it as well, where we measured every size that we received in our DC. So then you'd have a table on the product page that would pop up in the size guide that said a small is these measurements, a medium is these measurements, large is these measurements. And that was also like a team of 12 doing that.
Yeah.
Across the catalog. We did see positive conversion rate and lower return rate, but for the cost of running that and the kind of systems demands, it didn't really work for us at the time to have it more than a pilot scheme. But that, it is amazing data to have.
How long did you run that pilot scheme for?
6 months.
Wow.
And how much of a reduction in was it mainly like female fashion, or was it across all of?
It was across both men's and women's. So we did it across the whole catalog while we were running the scheme.
And what sort of a reduction did you see in the returns rate?
I mean, obviously there's a lot of returns, there's other things that factor into returns rate, but we did see, it dropped from around 30 to 25, but we were doing some other activations around that as well. Like, I think the fit assistants in the studio also helped to say if it was true to size or not.
Yeah.
But it was a good,
And out of all of the things that you were doing, did you hold on to certain practices?
So we held on to the fit assistants in the studio to kind of gather the true to size nature and to measure the shooting size. So you had some scale of at least what one size was. And then we managed to maintain after the pilot, like returns rate, it varied depending on the season, but like if we're in markdown or not, but it was like around 25, 27. So we never hit 30 again. So it was an improvement.
Yeah. And did you, you said that the conversion rate was improved as well. How did you surface the sizing information? Did you do something to, to increase the visibility and thereby give additional assurance to people that the sizing was correct? Like, how did you achieve that? Why did the conversion rate increase, do you think?
So we did have a size and fit section on the PDP, but then we also had the pop-up, and we actually did highlight we made the kind of some UX improvements to the pop-up CTA that I think helped with that. And then when you hit into that, you got the grid with the measurements.
Yeah.
It's a massive overhead though, and I think price point, luxury has a better chance of making something like that work than certainly a fast fashion brand that's at the much lower. Unless you have fast volume.
If you're a monobrand that doesn't have a huge, if you're a monobrand, you should have the information anyway. So I think it's definitely something that is very helpful. I mean, that's the big, not to get into that too much, but that's the sort of holy grail that every tech company is chasing, is the digital size and fit solution.
Yeah, it's not
no one's landed on yet.
It's not the first time it's actually come up in conversation. Like if we rewind back to one of our earlier podcast episodes, I think Matt Brown was talking about his frustration with size and fit driving returns online, and I'd say, like, particularly in luxury, it must be quite challenging because that price point is so much higher.
I think part of Matt's point as well was around the customer experience. It was that whole idea of this company knows my fit and will be recommending product that fits me, and I have that assurance, and that is he referred to it like it's a very, very pleasant experience, and compared it with an experience of having an actual tailor who has measured you, and that everything that you're going to be presented with will fit you, and so that you have less of that concern about, okay, I have yet to try this on, will I end up having to return it, all of that kind of thing.
Yeah, there's some of that, but that leans into that in-store experience. And I know one of the things that Farfetch started to do post the acquisition of Browns was start to bring some of that kind of technology and some of that into store. And there would have been quite a bit of innovation in that space. And one of the things I'd be keen to understand is, how did that impact your online business? Did it work well? Did it work in tandem? What were kind of the impacts there, Marshall?
Yes, it definitely did positively impact the online business, especially because we did have quite a big cohort of customers who were, not necessarily based in the UK, but then they shopped through their personal shopper in the store. So they could then use the Store of the Future app to kind of place their orders through their assistant, through their shopper, but it would come through as a web sale. We ended up separating it out to have like a separate department, which is called the Club, which was those sort of customers, but it did generate more sales because also they got the assurance because they could communicate with their stylist while they were shopping online. I think that was a great use case of that.
And that was all part of the Store of the Future program.
Yeah, exactly.
What other kinds of things were in there?
I mean, it was a lot more like magic mirrors. So, if you're looking in the fitting room, you have suggest more of the shop the look kind of idea. And you could then, tap, these shoes. And then the sales assistant gets the notification through the app, bring the shoes to fitting room 5. And then also if they had the app, when they're coming into store, location services would know they're about to arrive. They could have pre-selected items they want to see. Also, the sales assistant has their whole history of, shopping. So it's a better way of serving them and connecting, the online and offline customer.
There's a lot of talk about whether or not retailers should develop an app for their for their business, and often the apps themselves would probably be not much more advanced than the website, except that the customer is always logged in. What you're talking about, there's a heap of additional functionality in that sort of an app. What's your take on that, Marshall? Do you think is it worth developing an app for your retail business if it's only slightly better than the website, or do you feel like you would need to have all of those additional pieces of functionality like location awareness? I'm coming in store. I'm already in store. I'm in the changing room. All of that sort of thing. I mean, obviously that you can see the benefit of all of that,
yeah.
And that makes it that makes it clear that an app would be useful. But yeah.
I think the biggest benefit of having an app is for loyalty
Mm-hmm.
and rewarding loyalty, whereas the Farfetch one, because they were already so advanced in what they were doing, and this was a big showcase moment, they probably took it further than most businesses would need to. I think and that's, like I'm now at Fenwick and we don't have an app, but I think there's
that was going to be my next question. If at Fenwick, would you actually get an app in that case? Yeah.
I think there's scope down the line, but I think that what it would be for would be, because that's the thing with an app, you basically opened up a direct portal to people's pockets where you can ping them notifications about products. But I mean, you need to be quite careful. It's not spamming them. So it is, things that they're interested in. So you do need to link up. I think that's the big power, is you're linking up that purchase history and the browsing history with promotions or products you might have in. And I think, discounts or perks for app customers. Like, I mean, to use Waitress as an example, I'm a sucker for that coffee. So that's why I've got my Waitress card, and I literally will go out of my way. Like, oh, I need groceries. Well, let's swing around Waitrose at about 2 p.m. so I can get the stuff for dinner and my coffee. And I think that's where, because Fenwick we have food, we have restaurants in the stores. I feel like that's where we could really leverage it.
And out of curiosity, because you mentioned loyalty, and I was at a conference last week, and there was a lot of discussion around loyalty for luxury brands. A number of years ago, a lot of luxury brands had the sense that loyalty was a little bit naff and wasn't really, it wasn't applicable in their business for their customer. And I think that they're coming around a little bit, and now there's this sense of, we're not talking about loyalty as much as we're talking about community. But what do you think about that? What's your take on loyalty, community?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's naff. I think also with brands, because it's multi-brand, the thing with loyalty is, in the kind of London multi-brand luxury fashion market, there's competition, so you almost have to offer something. And with our loyalty, it wasn't so much like, it wasn't a free coffee. It was free coffee if you came in, had your appointment, but we did it more around the services you received, exclusive that's what most luxury brands do now for loyalty. It's, invites to fabulous dinners or talks, or big brands will send people to fashion shows. When Louis Vuitton is doing the resort in Palm Springs, they fly people out who are big clients. I mean, that's the kind of future of loyalty. That
does sound like a gig that I would enjoy.
Exactly.
You might even do it for free.
The clienteling gig.
Brilliant. So Fenwick's little bit different to Browns.
A bit different.
But equally as interesting in terms of product catalogue breadth and the production overhead. But there must be some key differences in things like product access and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, what I've found, I'm 5 weeks in, so I don't know everything about the business yet. But I do find the ways of working, I think also just the nature of the business, because Fenwick is a national chain of department stores. We've got 9 in the UK. It is a big account for big beauty brands. Whereas at Browns, we sold beauty, but much more in a, Aesop and some really cult skincare quantities. Whereas at Fenwick, and because the website's very visible for these beauty brands, we're such a big account, they want my sort of role to basically work directly with them on assortment, go to their press days, go to their strategy sessions, and even to determine what's selling, how can we adapt the range and get different gift with purchases or promotions. And the fashion brands also work that way. I mean, they're more run. We have a lot more access to, swap outs. So we have regular meetings with each of the brands. So it's almost more the e-commerce sort of digital trading manager role is almost more of a buying role in terms of how I work with the brands than I did at Browns, because the buyers were the buyers, and they worked with the brands, and then they fed down to us mere mortals.
Yeah.
And now I'm I've got a seat at the table, and they want to know what's working, how can we drive sales?
Do you think that
what do you want from us?
Do the buyers see that as like, okay, hey, we're closing the loop and we're getting data back, or do they see it as the tail wagging the dog?
Like you mean the buyers at at Browns, for instance?
Well, yeah, Fenwick, I was thinking.
Fenwick, do the buyers welcome this more than I can imagine that they don't at Browns? But tell us.
Oh no! I think but it's the way luxury buying is set up. I think is very siloed in that sense, and there's a whole hierarchy within buying that you do your time to progress to the next level. So you can finally, be Miranda Priestley at Paris Fashion Week. But I mean, Fenwick, I think, because the mix of concessions in OwnBot is also a lot heavier on concession, and concessions are set up to work more directly with operational people like ecom rather than through buying. I mean, you have a concession sort of manager, but the buyers at Fenwick are actually they're quite open to this way of working. I mean, it's the way they kind of always work. So I think they're glad to get the access to the data, and it's a bit more of an efficient way of working, just going directly. Whereas in the past, Browns buyers would ask for this kind of data if they had a certain appointment that had requested it, but they would tend to source most of the data out of the merchandising team rather than through ecom.
Yeah.
So they would come to ecom with maybe some web stats if they wanted those, but sales wise, they went more through merchandising. Whereas the way Fenwick is set up, there's actually I have a sort of digital merchandising team that has access to all the data that they're after that we give the brands through our own working with them.
Very good. We're kind of approaching time to wrap up, but I do have a question. We talked a little bit about omnichannel, touched on it with the app for Browns, and Gordon and I talk quite regularly about how it is the job of the merchant or the retailer to ensure that each of the touch points for the customer are joined up in a kind of a sensible way, that it feels frictionless, that it feels like one single experience. And I know that in some cases, some luxury brands might feel, well, actually, we really want our customer to come in store. They have to feel, have the experience, have the welcome, and omnichannel isn't for us, and that sort of thing. And I was curious to know, for the Browns customer, did they enjoy the omnichannel experience? Did they use it? Maybe they had no opinion on it because it was so frictionless that they just felt that this was the experience, Well,
I think they enjoyed it, but I think it's one of those things where you notice it more when it's not there. And because we had and a lot of the competition in London offers that type of experience, or, coming from Hong Kong, they also would be used to it. So for that kind of Browns customer we had that was very tech savvy, they, I think, expected it. So it was almost like they would have really noticed if it wasn't there rather than really noticing that it was there, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Brilliant. One last question from me as we wrap up. So recently joined Fenwick. What are your big priorities in terms of the coming 12 months? What's on your hit list of things that we'd like to do that you can share with us?
Yeah, well, I think maybe because I grew up in the 90s, I still have I think it's a shame what's happening to department stores, I think, and I think it's exciting that there is an opportunity now to Fenwick is doing well, actually, in the kind of grand scheme of department stores, but it's an exciting opportunity to kind of, how does a department store function in, the 2020s? And I think what I've noticed is that we're very siloed in terms of our online experience with the categories, like beauty's its own landing page, women's its own landing page. in our Homestone landing page, I really want to create this sort of lifestyle brand that, because why would people shop with us if it's not to come for a one-stop shop? Because the benefit, the USP should be that we sell, nice home accessories and cool clothing brands and your kids wear and things for the dinner party you're having. And I think that's where we need to become more of this lifestyle destination through the online journey and the online merchandising and the online assortment as well. So I think that's what's exciting about it, is to kind of create this journey and this destination.
That is brilliant, and we wish you the absolute best of luck, although we don't think that you'll need the luck to do it, because you sound like you've got a very clear vision.
I can get it.
Great.
Thanks so much, Marshall. We'll talk to you again soon. Take care.
Thank you both.
So Gordon, what did we learn?
We learned that luxury is difficult.
Luxury, yeah, it sounds very difficult.
It sounds really challenging, doesn't it? It's not like myth-busting luxury is what I learned lots about today. I
think one of the interesting things, I recall a Black Friday that I would prefer not to recall, where we had an issue with the promotion for a particular product that was very much in demand, a fine product, in the realm of luxury. A lot of people wanted it. And there was kind of a last minute discount was put on the product, which caused problems for the website when I was re-indexing the pricing, etc. And there was quite a bit of marketing spend behind the generation of anticipation around this product. And when the product was actually sold, it sold out in seconds flat. And then there was a whole amount of post sale chatter on socials about, oh my God, they didn't have it anyway. I couldn't get it. Did you get it? Nobody got it. Did they really have it for sale at that price, etc., etc. And what happened was, it turned out that after all of the effort and work and everything else, they only had 20 of the items actually in stock. So they had 20 units. And there was a similar point there.
Balenciaga Triple S.
Yeah,
them.
you have even PlayStation 5 a couple of years ago, which brought down websites across the world. It brought down websites, and in some cases the websites only had a couple, had tens of them to sell, and it caused, I remember one particular site, 4 or 5 hours of disruption, because people just kept on hitting the site to try and get this product. Anyway, I guess my point is, you spend an awful lot of time, there's an awful lot of marketing, there's an awful lot of effort goes into it. Is it all worth it?
Is it worth it?
Yeah.
I think we learned that in the case of luxury, I'm going to stop pronouncing luxury like that now. But in the case of luxury, I think
you're still pronouncing it that way.
Of course.
Try it again.
Luxury.
No. Luxury. Yes, perfect.
So in the case of selling luxury, I'm so self-conscious of that now. I can't say it. So
high quality premium goods.
In the tier above, in the tier above premium. See, I get away with it. I think we learned some really interesting things around the importance of storytelling. Well, there's a theme of how that investment that was made in terms of production, in terms of shop the look, outperformed an algorithm.
Yeah.
And then I think, okay, well,
is that really surprising?
Well, it shouldn't be, because that's what we tell everybody that they should be doing. Absolutely. So I'm just delighted to get that affirmation.
But what was interesting was the sales declined if they took the shop the look off of the PDP. But it was better to have both shop the look and the algorithm in there,
because people shop in different ways.
Yeah, exactly.
They want different things at different times.
Yeah. But we've often had that conversation. Is it worthwhile actually curating the goods, proposing an outfit or proposing a shop to look? I mean, of course it is. That's how you're going to distinguish yourself as a retailer. People go to your particular store because they know how you're going to present things, and they want to see things presented that way to them so that they know what they're supposed to buy, because most people don't have the same taste that the buyers have.
I think to be able to inspire customers to be able to put a story together. But particularly for a brand, if you think like Browns, multi-brand, tier above premium retailer, that's their role. That's the buyer's role, is to pull these stories together and inspire customers.
Yeah.
I thought it was very interesting, the idea that some of their customers' personal shoppers would arrive in store with the app.
Oh, I love that.
I just thought, how fantastic. And then this idea
how much
of like
do I need to spend for that?
Video calling your customer that's far away whilst you're pulling together a collection. Oh, I'd yearn for that level of service.
What I thought was quite interesting was, because we have been asked, and I asked the question on the call, we've been asked a couple of times to build an app. And often we're pointed at these kind of website to app conversion services. And, the app that Farfetch have put together for Browns, the store of the future, I mean, there's phenomenal technology in that. And that is not the kind of app that we're being asked to build.
No.
So I guess Marshall's answer was, well, if you can bring loyalty into the mix there, then it's going to be worthwhile.
Do you know whose app's brilliant? And it's recent, and they are also in that luxury space. Brown Thomas, absolute cracking upgrade to the app recently.
Oh yeah, that was a couple of months ago.
That was a couple of months ago, and of course, same across Arnott's. But the app, as well as being able to shop it, it's got this fully integrated loyalty now, and it just works brilliantly. And I'm a bit of a sucker for bed linen.
Yeah.
And I actually had quite a lot of points, apparently
that
I never knew about.
Right.
As I was scrolling through the app, and my recommendations were popping up. But really nicely integrated loyalty platform. They've done a super job. It works really. It's really slick. That's a great example of taking core app functionality. Yeah. We might as well just have your website works just as well on a mobile. But taking that and then embedding something in there that's useful. And of course, when you're in Brown Thomas, you can never find your loyalty card, but it's always there.
Yeah, I have.
And that's like bringing that down to earth with a bump. Same in Tesco. Why have you got the Tesco app? Because it's got my club card on it, and that's a loyalty application.
It's an interesting,
as well.
Yeah, it was an interesting point, because it does seem that even with all of that tech, I am now in the store. bring me my clothing.
Bring me my things.
Yeah, even with all of that, the point that he made out, or the point that he got to, was the loyalty piece. And I it is an interesting area. I think for 2024, it's going to be a theme. It has been a theme, but I think it'll be more of something that people focus on, and it's beyond loyalty. It's nearly the kind of community. Not to get soppy about it, but it's the idea of how do we build the community, because these are not just people that we are going to reward for being loyal, but they're also people who are actual advocates for us. They're part of our community. We embrace them to maybe give us feedback.
We get their feedback and see what we can change. I think is the super important,
because it is a tier above loyalty.
A tier above loyalty. Yeah. I love it. Now on to Fenwick's. So.
Fenwick's for everybody in
as
Ireland.
Ger has been pronouncing it.
Yeah.
So
I feel very fancy when I say Fenwick's.
Fenwick's is obviously a brand, a retailer dear to my heart. It's a department store I have always loved, and it's interesting to see or to hear about the take on what is that role of the modern department store. So you've got your kind of hyper luxury department stores, your Selfridges and your Harrods.
Yeah.
Fenwick's is premium. It's an attainable place, but actually hearing the take that we can stitch those lifestyle stories together. It's important to get the assortment right, but if the assortment's right, how do we bring those stories together online so that you can do all of those things as a one-stop shop? Yeah.
And what I really liked was this. It was just before the call when we were just chatting as we were kind of getting set up, and he mentioned, Marshall mentioned how Fenwick's was cool in Edwardian times, and it was cool in the 60s, and I can imagine that, where where there's kind of a like a cool cycle of, you know, or a cycle of coolness.
Well, it's the big question is, right, one of the things I'm thinking is, like, will department stores come back? So if you think, right, if you think of House of Fraser, which is often pronounced House of Fraser, which drives me bananas.
Okay, okay.
But if you think about
This is the pronunciation episode, obviously.
It's the pronunciation episode.
House of Fraser, Fenwicks, and Luxury.
Luxury. But if you think about, like, House of Fraser, just before its demise, and then you've of course got the demise of Debenhams. So the general school of thought is that actually the department store is on the way out, because we've got infinite choice at our fingertips, the fingertips of desire. Thanks, Dean. Stole the Deanism. That the department store be on the way out, but actually, there's a bit of I think there's going to be a bit of a department store renaissance. I think that Fraser's group are doing a good job of the restoration of the Fraser's department stores that they're investing in. We're seeing, like, Brown Thomas on our own shores, fabulous. Selfridges, fabulous. Harrods, fabulous. Fenwick's doing really well. So is there a role for the department store to do that curation job? Yeah. This is a broader retail question. I don't even know if it's an e-commerce question. But to do that curation job and to present that one-stop shop in a way that's really desirable with great experience. House of Fraser was just underinvested. Yeah. It was like, it was not a nice experience. But if you go into, like, my recent encounter with House of Fraser's in Belfast in Victoria Square, refit in there, stunning. Yeah,
yeah. And yes, I think the answer to your question feels like yes, because it's to say let's say the presentation of the lifestyle, not just, you know, it's not here's the look, it's here's the lifestyle on a general level. This is how your home. This is your homeware lifestyle proposition. This is your ladies' wear. This is how your kids are going to be dressed. You know, and you're broadening it across a range. And maybe this is unfair, and I'm not an expert in the whole, you know, downfall of the department stores, but it certainly felt like the department store was where you got a broad range of things cheaply, as opposed to a broad range of things that were aspirationally fitting into what you would like as your lifestyle.
Get off that promotional cycle. Get off, like, Debenhams on the Blue Cross sale. But, like, get away from the promotional cycle and get into that aspirational cycle. Yeah. Stuff that people actually want and get excited about and are prepared to make that investment in. Yeah, and if you create that, then surely that's what's going to excite people back into the store. Oh, I can't wait to see what's in this season at X department store.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's still an opportunity. I mean, it doesn't have to all be investment pieces. You know, I think there's still an opportunity that at a department store level, you know, you might come in to look at an evening wear, like something for an event, and you might leave with, you know, the kids, some clothing for the kids. You know, I mean,
not all beauty needs to be directional.
Right. You got to explain that to me. What do you mean?
So, right, okay. So you think about the beauty department and the beauty hall. And that's, like, potentially, like, thousands, tens of thousands of SKUs, or a really, really edited selection of very, very premium price point options. Yeah. And actually, for the department store shopper, then isn't it about, actually, I need to be able to get everything. I don't need €200 moisturizer today. Or maybe I do need €200 moisturizer. Yeah. But you know what? I also need
the essentials.
But I need the essentials to be, like, nice and it doesn't have to be directional. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see where that kind of mid-tier department store lands.
There is, because when you have the luxury and you have the you know, the premium, there is the tier below the premium, which is still an area that doesn't have to be cheap, or, you know, like, you can still you still have a requirement to buy things that are, you know, sometimes a little bit of an investment or a treat, but they're not yet in the luxury sphere.
Or they're not in that. There is a pyramid. That,
oh God, there has to be a pyramid.
Of course, there's a pyramid, and at the pyramid, at the pinnacle, you have.
Is it a triangle or a pyramid?
It's a triangle.
Okay,
it's the
triangle. Let's get it clear.
The triangle of luxury.
The triangle of doom.
And then you have at the pinnacle, you have luxury, and then you have premium, and then you have your mid-market product, and then you have your tier of entry level or more budget friendly product. And I think there's a lot of blurring between kind of mid-market and premium, and then premium and luxury.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see how the department store thing plays out.
Yeah.
But I think the role of e-commerce and omnichannel managers and leaders within that space is not, as Marshall says, and I think it's brilliant that he is getting involved in that buying cycle, is to actually use the data that's being generated, build those feedback loops in, and actually shape the direction of the experience, and that experience must be carried through online and in store, and focus on editing and storytelling.
Because
which
it has to be the case that as well that the e-commerce platform must be the leading edge of what's happening out there. You know, if you're thinking about where you're looking for where, you know, the stone in the pool with the ripple effect. I mean, some of the stores are going to be the very end, the very external ripple, and presumably at this stage, the e-commerce must be where you really spot the trends as they happen, and as people's behaviors and attitudes are changing to the fashion that they're buying. So it makes a whole heap of sense, and it's interesting to see that now in Marshall's role, that's where he is, that's where they're at, and they're looking for that kind of feedback.
I can't wait to see what they do.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Gordon, it's been a pleasure again, as always.
It's been luxury.
So much, and thanks very much to all our listeners, and we'll speak to you all soon. You've been listening to Functional and Fabulous with Ger Ciarán and Gordon Newman. If you'd like to know more about the podcast or about Studio 49 and Omnichannel Stories, please go to functionalandfabulous.ie. Our sound engineer was Elaine Smith, and the show was produced by Roger Overall.